The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Hello, and welcome to Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast about the nanny. I am Shawn Pasquale here with Toria Sheffield.
Hello.
And we are talking about episode 16 of Fran Drescher's amazing sitcom, The Nanny. Season 1, episode 16, Schlepped Away, which is a parody title of the movie Swept Away. I almost said it again, of Swept Away. And basically, it is the one in which their vacation gets postponed by a snowstorm and they all end up at Sylvia's house.
Sylvia being Fran's mother.
Yes. Yeah, Fran's mom.
Yes, and the episode starts as they often do with the family around the breakfast table, and it's established that it's been snowing in New York for days and days, and they haven't seen the sun in forever, and they decided they're going to take a family vacation to the Caymans. So that sets everything off.
Yeah, this episode also, we should note, was directed by Linda Day, and it was written, this is another episode that Fran and her husband Mark wrote together, or her ex-husband Mark wrote together. So we've covered a couple of these already. We had a couple of them, including the pilot, and I find that these episodes are generally pretty strong. Like, I think the My Fair Lady episode was also Fran and Mark, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they often do episodes that hinge on Mr. Sheffield and Fran basically being de facto married, but not really married. And this is kind of one of them because they're going to go vacation together. And I also have this little note that at the beginning when Fran finds out that she's going to get to go away with them, she shares a quote hot tip about the buffet. And she says, go right past the bread and go to the seafood. And I wrote, that was my Nana Molly to a T. Whenever we would go to this Chinese food buffet, we were forbidden to, quote, fill up on rice because you didn't get your money's worth with the rice. And so that actually kind of segues to what I think is the biggest delight about this whole episode is I felt like it was like written for me, and like everything, the last detail in this apartment where Fran grew up reminded me of my grandparents' home in Florida. And so that's what was fun about it personally for me. But
yeah. They also, I feel like, so this was the episode we mentioned last week when we were talking about the writers of this show just wanting to include Niles in every possible scenario, even if it's completely nonsensical that he would be there. And so this episode, when they do finally all get together and they're going to go away on vacation, they all get into the limo to drive to the airport, and they're all in the backseat of this limo, and Cece's also with them, even though she's not going on vacation with them, but they're going to drop her off somewhere, which is enough of a stretch. But then the camera like pans over and Niles has a line and you see he's driving. And then Mr. Sheffield's like, Niles, why are you driving the limo? And he's like, oh, I just wanted to be there to say goodbye to you, sir. And it's like, It makes no sense that Niles would be driving. Like it's completely ridiculous, and even the line doesn't really sell. And
it was Mr. Sheffield was like, "Oh, Niles, you didn't need to insist to drive us." And Niles said something like, "Nothing will stop me from making sure you get on that plane." You know, being like he's so eager to have them out of the house so he can have alone time that he would physically drive them to the airport himself. But it was a completely like sitcom-y plot device to get them all together, because what ends up happening is. Fran insists that she knows a shortcut to get to the airport. She ends up having them drive in and out of these neighborhoods in Queens. She gets totally lost and is like, let's just stop at my mother's place, regroup. Cece can use the bathroom because she has to pee. And then I'll know my way from my mother's apartment. But when after stopping into the apartment, they find out that all of the airports have closed. This is like a huge blizzard coming. They are now... Oh, and the bridges are closed back to Manhattan.
I felt like one of my notes early on in this episode was like Fran's reasoning for going to her mom's is weak, but I get why they had to get there eventually, but it's like it like stretches the credibility of believability. Like,
yes, everything that gets them all together and then gets them to stuck in Fran's parents' apartment and the apartment that she grew up in feels contrived. And like, honestly, I would have honestly believed it more if she was like, oh my God, I realized my favorite bathing suit is at my mother's, so we have to stop there. Like that would have somehow made more sense to me.
Yes, that's all they needed actually, was to just be like, I want to stop at my mom's on the way to the airport. And then they get in the car and it's snowy. And you could even still do the scene where they're like lost getting to her mom's, where she's like, I thought it was just here. Just take another left, take another left. Like, and then get to the mom's, rather that I feel like they went through so much effort to be like, oh, I guess, well, the only way I'll know directions to the airport is if we start at my mother's house. Which is like, okay, I guess. Also, before we get too deep into the chunk of the bulk of the episode, there's a line in the beginning where they're excitedly talking about vacation. It's another breakfast scene, and they're talking about going on vacation. And Maggie says something about being really excited for like the lifeguards and like going in the pool and like floating. And then Brighton says, I'm super excited to see Maggie floating face down in the water. And like everyone just kind of goes like, haha, and then they brush past it. But like, is Brighton a serial killer? What is happening with this character?
It was a very mean thing to say to your sister.
It's a psychotic thing to say, basically, period. Like, I'm so excited. I hope she drowns while we're there.
Again, they just shoehorn lines. They just feed Brighton lines because he's a kid that can deliver them well, even if an 11-year-old would never say them. They play him like he's 20, basically. And no, I clocked that as well. And so, also Maggie, yes, she's going to be totally boy crazed and she's excited to see the lifeguards and the muscly boys on the beach. So they all have these things that they're really looking forward to on this vacation. I also have a note that I wrote, Fran rubs this in Cece's face so hard because at first Cece thinks she might get to join them on the vacation. And then Mr. Sheffield is like, oh no, like this is really a chance for me just to, spend time with the family, Cece. At which point Fran comes in going, Mr. Sheffield, look at the bikini I got for the honeymoon. I mean vacation. And like says this pointedly at Cece. And then she holds up this tiny bikini and he's like, yes, Gracie will look adorable in that. And she goes, Gracie, no, this is for me. And we're just supposed to be like, Cece's pathetic. And it's sort of to the point now where I'm like, God, Cece, you're a sad son of a bitch. Like, I just, like, this is just awful. So they get to this like small 2-bedroom apartment. I guess it's not that small, but it's a queen's apartment. And the thing about it, we've seen it once before in the Here Comes the Brood episode where they're getting ready for this wedding, but it is an apartment where all of the furniture is covered in plastic. There are knickknacks everywhere. There's fake flowers. There's a menorah. There's kitsch covering every surface. And like, again, that was my grandparents' house. Like that was how they decorated. My grandmother found things at yard sales that she thought were exquisite and she would get them for like $1.25. And it would be like this multicolored pastel pink ceramic, fruit bowl.
Yeah.
Or one with the actual fake grapes and strawberries and oranges in it. And it would be all over the apartment. And it really is that aesthetic.
Yeah. It's old lady Jewish chic.
Yeah. And also
my great grandmother's house looked exactly like Sylvia's apartment. Like eerily similar to Sylvia's decor down to the plastic on the couch. My grandmother was a little bit more, she didn't have like the plastic on the couch. She kind of moved away from some of that, but like a lot of it was still very similar. She had a lot of tchotchkes, a lot of random things on shelves that were important to her, but weren't actually fancy or worth like saving the way she did. I mean, I remember when my grandma died, my mom was like, what am I supposed to do with all these things? These are all like collectible. They're all worth money. And then I started looking all of the things up on like antique websites and stuff, and nothing was worth any money. Like it was, because it was all shit that like got sold to them as like, this is going to be worth money someday. But like everyone was buying that crap, like plates that they bought off of TV that were like special plates with collector's item certificates for how like special this china would be someday, and it's like, yeah, but everyone bought that, so it's not worth anything.
Yep. No.
So.
Well, and so then they're stuck at Sylvia's apartment and for the foreseeable next couple days, all of them as a group, and they're going to try to quote unquote have their vacation there. But that basically just means they're sort of sitting in their vacation clothes, eating TV dinners, eating tongue that Sylvia has made, and watching like The Price is Right and Wheel of Fortune. And I don't know about you, but there was this, at one point, Fran's like, well, why don't we have a happy hour? And she pulls out wine and she goes, do you want red or purple?
I got so excited. I wrote Manischewitz.
Yes. Yeah. So that also hit so close to home. And then, Cece or someone's like, don't you have anything else? And she's like, Bailey's. And she has this little like travel size bottle of Bailey's that was just clearly like grabbed from a hotel room. And that was also the only kind of alcohol that my grandparents had around. They were not big drinkers, and it was very sweet wines, sweet dessert alcohols.
You know what's funny is Elizabeth and I don't really drink, and all we do have if we have alcohol in our house is Moscato or Bailey's. So
Did your grandparents ever have anything hard?
My grandparents, no one in my family ever had hard liquor. No one was really drinkers. My grandparents had like a cabinet with like half drunk stuff that was like 45 years old that was never opened, and like the labels. I remember like when I like got old enough to be like, ooh, I can like steal alcohol now. Like everything was always expired, and like the labels were brown, or like the cork would break off into it because it was like so dried out. So
it's exactly the same. And my grandfather, and I don't even know if this is true, but he claimed that Jewish people they don't have a problem with alcohol. He used to talk about the men who used to instead of going home after work, would go out and spend their paychecks at bars, and he had nothing but disdain for it. And he sort of insinuated that it was like a Gentile thing to sort of like
have
big drinkers.
Problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly. Yeah. That's what he used to say.
Hey, listen, maybe, who knows? I mean, my dad's side of the family, they're Italian Catholics. There's some drinking problems on that side of the family. So, but not on the Jewish side.
No. I mean, my mother used to be horrified by my father's alcohol consumption, which was again like a pre-dinner drink and a post-dinner drink, and she was like, "He has a problem."
So what
she doesn't talk like that, but no, she doesn't sound like that at all. But she's very my Jewish side is very distrustful and fearful of alcohol, I would say.
Yeah, that tracks. But what makes this episode work really well, actually, is the juxtaposition between all of the stuff, all of the, for lack of a better term, Jewish Easter eggs that are found throughout this episode. But then there's also, you get the flip side of it, which is like this episode, the comedy heavily hinges on like the fish out of water culture shock that the Sheffields go through in this like sort of like lower middle class, Jewish home. And like one of my favorite bits is Mr. Sheffield not knowing what Gilligan's Island is and being very perplexed about the show, and that like they never get off the island. And that is like both, I think, speaking to like that he's like so rich and busy that he doesn't have time for like television, but also I think it's like because he's British, they don't have the same television. They didn't grow up on the same TV.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's great, man. It's such a funny bit. That made me laugh like a lot. And then there's Brighton enjoying all of the class, like the like blue collar jokes scattered around the apartment. Like there's like a whoopee cushion, and there's a pillow that says "Who cut the cheese?" And
and he's playing like mahjong or something with Sylvia.
Yeah, it's great.
And meanwhile, Maggie gets paired off with this boy who lives in the apartment, and I wrote he looks like he's 40, but I looked it up. This guy, the character's name is Kenny, and I think he's going to be in at least several more episodes. He's comedian Greg Rogel. I think it's Rogel with a hard G. He is a Long Island, New York comedian. He has appeared on The Tonight Show, Conan, Louis, Half Baked. He's a legitimate working comedian, and he plays this young Jewish aspiring comedian in the show as well. And I think in later episodes, they actually use some of his actual stand-up bits. But I wrote, is he supposed to be 17? He looks 40. The actor was actually 27 at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Maggie has her own little thing going on with the boys she meets in the apartment. And the thing is that much as, we discuss, sometimes the like crux of the conflict doesn't happen until much later in these episodes. And at this point, maybe it's more the midpoint. The thing is, she discovers a note that the butcher has written to her mother. And it's like a flirty love note. It's something like, Sylvia, my heart is with you always. And the thing is, one thing that we really haven't touched on yet is this whole time, starting from like scene 1 of this episode, Fran is talking about how she has such wonderful memories of her family and vacationing with them. And even when it was hot and sticky and humid, it didn't matter because you were with your family. And she was so excited to sort of like bring the Sheffields into this apartment that she grew up with, because she always says, we didn't always have a lot, but we always had love and we had warmth. And my parents really built this loving home for us. And then she feels like it was just this huge lie. She thinks that her mother is having an affair with the butcher and cheating on her father. And it's like her whole reality is shaken. Wow, the Sheffields are all crammed in this apartment with her.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
But that comes later. It's more the midpoint.
Yeah, but I actually think that is a perfect kind of B plot for the midpoint. I mean, this episode was the one where they're all in Sylvia's apartment together. Like that was definitely like the A plot and the hook, and they got to it pretty quickly. I mean, I could have done without them being lost in the limo, but what are you going to do? But I think that was sort of the meat, and then even another like layer below that, I think, was also about establishing, again, Fran brings so much joy and makes this broken family that she moved in with feel like a family, because they're all bummed out. She's the first one to like go put on her like vacation outfit and be like, we're going to make the best of it. Like, and then by the end of the episode, they're all wearing their vacation clothes and they are making the best of it and they are having a great time. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like the Sylvia plot was like just perfect for like a little B runner that again syncs up perfectly with the A story, in that, everything that you were explaining, that Fran is sort of bringing everyone here because she has all these amazing memories and she's trying to make these memories for her, kids, for lack of a better term. And then that's kind of shattered, very briefly. And then we get what I thought was like a really hilarious resolution to that plot line too.
Oh, it was hilarious. And then I think really, there was some grains of life truth in there.
Absolutely.
Because there's this period of time where like Fran is skulking around, thinking her whole life, her whole childhood has been a lie. She's she's sidebarring with Mr. Sheffield about how horrible this all is. And then it sort of culminates in this big fight between, I think I said culminates like an Australian person, didn't I? It sort of slipped out weird.
It's your British roots.
It culminates in this big fight between Fran and Sylvia in the kitchen, which is very funny because the kitchen only has these like very flimsy dividers between the rest of the apartment. So everyone can hear this happening. And, and we should say that meanwhile, Fran's father is never on screen. I think we've established that they are definitely doing that thing where we never actually meet the actor. Like he's always either in the bathroom or he's cutting his toes in the bedroom. He's always off doing something gross and old manish and funny. But so he's not around during this whole fight.
And I looked, he does eventually show up. So I don't even get like, I don't know if it was like they thought it would be a funny bit that they would just never show him, and then eventually the show went on for so long they were like, ugh, we need to cast this guy because we need plots. Or if it was that they very specifically wanted an actor that then they just couldn't get until they got him. I'm not really sure, but I love that he never shows up, and I almost wish that they never did it. that he never showed up on the show at once.
I was convinced after this episode that was the route they were taking. But, okay. I guess we'll meet. Yeah, it seems like no matter what, he's going to be a letdown now. I love having him be the guy that you imagine. You fill in the blank. Yeah. But so Fran and her mom are they're in this fight, and Sylvia's like, "What is your problem?" And Fran's like, "My problem is like you've been running around behind Dad's back with Paul Zazuznik, the butcher. I found your note." And her mom is like genuinely shocked and taken aback. And she's like, "What?" She's like, "No." She's like, that's flirting. We flirt. And she's like, "And your father knows about it." And Fran's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, sometimes he comes down to watch Paul wink at me, or no, to watch Paul hand me the meat." So it's clearly this like kinky thing in her parents' relationship that, her father enjoys it when she's getting other attention from other men. And then there's also this beat that, really, I think the life truth of it all, Sylvia ultimately is like, you can make fun because you're still young, but the reality is I don't turn heads anymore. But when, the butcher winks at me with his good eye, I feel young again. And I'm like, and then, it was a really like, it sort of reminded me of that moment when Mr. Sheffield's nanny drops some like real honest truth about like what it's like being somebody who goes from family to family and falls in love with these families and then doesn't have anyone at the end of your life. And you kind of have this like genuine like, oh, moment. I had that same feeling when I listened to Sylvia sort of explain what it's like losing that part of your identity over time.
Well, yeah, and I think that's also why the a couple that's married the longest, that's truly happy. Like so much of it is just based on comfort and feeling really comfortable and safe, and you as either partner being like super possessive like doesn't make someone feel safe, it's an intense feeling, and it's such an easy way to push someone away. And I think that this resolution sort of speaks to how also how like their marriage works, because he knows she's not going anywhere. He knows she loves him. They've built this beautiful family together. They have all these memories together. But like if it makes her feel good to have the butcher wink at her, then like good, that's nice. Like it's nice. It makes her feel beautiful. It makes her feel seen, and it doesn't hurt anything. And like, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think that's just kind of fine,
Well, and clearly Morty has some kind of cuck fetish. It sounds like. That's what it sounds. Whatever.
Yeah, Morty's hey, listen. Yeah, I'm not here to kink shame. There's nothing wrong with that.
I like to always say, but what if my kink is kink shaming? When people accuse me of it. I always say that. Good point. I always say that because I get accused of that a lot, because I am
you're very
sex
judgy.
Negative. Yeah, I'm judgy and I'm pretty sex negative.
This episode had so much good stuff. We talked last week also about physical comedy, and this episode had so many good examples of physical comedy that's really done so right. But the best scene I thought was Fran is upset. She can't sleep, and she comes in, everyone's sleeping in Sylvia's house. So like, there's not a ton of bedrooms. Obviously it's a small apartment. So you've got the pull out couches out, and Niles is sleeping on the floor. And there's all of this, like, just great direction, like shenanigans with like Cece so Niles and Mr. Sheffield are both in the living room, and Niles is sleeping on the floor. Mr. Sheffield is sharing the bed with his son. Brighton is having a kickboxing nightmare and kicking the crap out of Mr. Sheffield. So they wake him up, and he goes in the other room, and then he has to kick Cece out of her room. And then Cece comes in, and then she gets into bed, thinking she's getting into bed with Mr. Sheffield, but he's already gotten out of bed to go talk to Fran in the kitchen. And Niles has gotten off the floor because he's been stepped on multiple times, and he gets in the bed, and it's great. It's all really, really funny, and it's so smooth and well directed. But then they end it with like this really creepy Niles moment where Cece climbs into bed with him, and he makes some, and he has his eyes open and is fully aware that she's getting into bed with him. And he's sort of smirking like, haha, I'm going to like pull this one on her. And then she gets into bed with him. seemingly grabs his like junk, because then he makes a comment about like, that's not what you think it is. That's not the heating pad or something like that.
Yeah, that's not the water bottle if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But,
And it's such a weird bit, man.
Well, it's a weird bit almost only because you're like, Cece, like, tone it down. Everyone's in this apartment and you're trying to start something with Mr. Sheffield when his children are like in the next room and all this. But I thought it was more cruel of Niles because it didn't seem like he was deriving pleasure from this in terms of like sexual pleasure. No. It seemed like he couldn't wait to humiliate Cece.
Yeah. I mean, it was just cruel. It was like needlessly cruel. And also he was like, it was all weird, you know, like if he was, it's almost funnier if he's asleep and then he wakes up and she's already doing it and he's like, ooh, you know, but for him to be awake, waiting, like letting the whole thing unfold just to humiliate her was so mean.
I think it's really funny because since, you know, we go back and we edit these episodes and we re-listen, for so long, we were just so happy and pleased with everybody just being mean to Cece. And we were like, that's the purpose that she serves. And I feel like there's been this shift in us recently where we're like, man, like Cece, like, I wish you valued yourself more to get yourself out of these situations. Yeah. I wish you removed yourself from this toxic environment. Like,
yeah, seriously.
But yeah, that was a really funny thing. My favorite line was when they first get to the apartment, Cece is like, where's your bathroom? And Sylvia points her that way. And then Brighton goes, where's your second bathroom? And Fran goes, it's at the luncheonette on the corner, but make sure you order something. I recommend the grilled cheese. Dude. So like, you know, they spent their whole lives using the restaurant next door's bathroom as their second bathroom.
It's great, man. There was also, well, are we doing favorite? We should transition if we're going to do, I guess we explained kind of the whole episode. We sort of touched on all like although I will bring up one last thing that wasn't a line, but was really funny is Sylvia brings Niles in from the other room after they're all changed to go to bed just to point out that she let him borrow her world's greatest lover nightgown and he's wearing it. And then they all laugh at Niles and that's the entire joke. And I just thought it was funny that they're like, put this on him. He'll look hilarious.
And he did. A nightgown. It's like an oversized Florida tee. Like my mom used to wear those to bed, a huge giant t-shirt, novelty tee. Also, we should mention that, you know, Shawn, you touched on this, that the episode ends with they're now all fully like acclimated to this lifestyle. They're all very happily watching Wheel of Fortune. Like they're yelling at the TV and then the blizzard clears up and they get to go. And there's this really specific button on this episode where they're in the limo, they're driving towards the airport. And then they just go, wait, where's Brighton? It cuts back to Sylvia's apartment and Sylvia goes, more tongue. And then Brighton does the Kevin McAllister hands on face Home Alone scream. And that was the end of the episode.
And now, segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
We can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Shawn and Toria. So, okay, we went over some. We went over some of our favorites.
Favorite line. Favorite line is have you been going through my meat? Which is funny both in and out of context. It's just a funny line, but it happens when Sylvia, you know, when Fran finally confronts her mother about these notes she's been finding from the butcher, which she's been finding in the meat. She's like, what about the notes from the butcher, Mom? And Sylvia's first reaction is she just goes, have you been going through my meat? Which I just thought was such a good, it's such a good line. It sounds like an insane thing to say, but it's perfect in context and it's really great. It's really, really great.
So one of my favorite little moments was, Fran and Mr. Sheffield are talking and Maggie, you know, is crushing on this boy this Kenny boy who lives in the apartment. And Maggie literally goes, I hear Jewish men make excellent husbands. And Mr. Sheffield like side glances at Fran and goes, I wonder where she heard that. And then Fran completely seriously and lacking like all self-awareness goes, probably Niles. He's always buzzing something in her ear. Just the idea that she like truly thinks that like that's something that Niles would have told Maggie and has no recollection of doing it herself, like really made me laugh.
Yeah. There was also another great, I had all my favorite lines were Sylvia, but it's as they're getting acclimated, there's a scene where Gracie comes in and she's like, I'm doing the laundry. It's so fun. And Sylvia paid me $1 to do it. And Fran goes, Ma, $1? And Sylvia goes, what? She's got no experience. and she fully commits to it. Like, she's just like, yeah, she's all in. And that is 100% something that my grandma would have said.
Yep. And then I also love this line near the end after they're completely now fully absorbed in like the lifestyle of Sylvia's apartment. They're sitting in their like comfy clothes watching Price is Right, and Niles just screams, buy a value, twit. Like after he'd never even seen the show before several days earlier. Yeah, screaming at the TV.
It's adorable. This was a delightful episode. And we got our Yiddish in the title this week.
Yep. Schlepp. And so Schlepp is to go a great distance that's a bit out of your way, usually carrying something cumbersome and sometimes unnecessary.
Yes.
And then the nanny trivia this week, it kind of ties in well to the fact that we had a lot of Sylvia and family stuff. So this is really a nanny correction time. So several episodes back, I mentioned that there was an Italian version of the show called La Tata, and Shawn and I came to the conclusion that this like had to be an Italian remake, not a dubbed version, because so much about the character's backstory was different, because it's like she wasn't Jewish, she was from Italy, blah, blah, blah. I actually looked into it. It was, I think we'd been like, there's no way you could dub a show that change it. It was in fact dubbed.
Wow.
This is from Wikipedia. In Italy, the American series was heavily redubbed and named La Tata. Fran Fine was renamed Francesca Casase from the Italian town of Sicilia, central Italy. That's all butchered. Wow. I don't care though. I don't care if people are mad. It says Sylvia Fine was renamed Zia Assunta, Aunt Assunta, a relative of Francesca's family, offering a shelter to her niece. Yetta, who was Fran's grandmother, was renamed Zia Yetta, Aunt Yetta, and the few bits of her backstory provided were altered to hide her Jewish origins. Fran was no longer of Jewish heritage, but hailing from a Roman Catholic family, having become a lapsed Catholic. Almost every reference to Jewish religion was altered accordingly in the show. In the Italian adaptation, Francesca's parents live in Italy, and the only relatives who immigrated to the Americas were her two aunts and Aunt Assunta's husband, Antonio, whose face is never seen. So that was Fran's father.
Wow.
And can you imagine? They had to basically rewrite and redub, not just dub.
Wow. So what was Schlepped Away called over there?
Oh God, I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
The one where they stay at her aunt's house.
Yeah, and honestly, another thing I read about this is that they said that sometimes this led to like extreme rewrites in the dubbing, and it even said, admittedly, the episode where they go to a kibbutz made little sense.
Wow, admittedly, yes. I like that someone had to admit that at some point, like some Italian TV writer guy had to be like, yeah, no, that one episode was really tough.
Just like at a certain point, it's like, wow, just remake your own goddamn show.
Yeah.
Like,
that's crazy.
Just truly just erasing Fran's actual
heritage.
Origin.
Yeah, that's
heritage.
Well, listen, that's a bummer, but this was a great episode, and I hope that they figured out a way to at least translate the best parts of this episode for the benefit of, or I hope that a lot of Italian fans of the show eventually just were like, I got to see what this is at. What's actually going on here, you know?
And then they found out it was about a Jewess, and they
were like,
never again, never again. And then the Fran or the Cece, I don't know. I don't think there's a clear winner in this one. I think we both really relate to. I feel caught in the middle because it was the Sheffields going to a Jewish home, and that was my life. So
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not sure what Cece did in this episode really, other than
grab Niles'
exist.
junk.
Yeah, like, so it's a tough one. You know, I forget where she was even supposed to go.
To some senators. Well, I mean, do you complain?
Oh, right.
A lot?
She's going to sleep with the senator and for nothing. Yeah.
I guess the question is, would you make the best of this or would you complain?
No, I would probably make the best of it.
Okay, then you're the Fran.
I would make the best of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
so we're both the Fran.
We're the Fran. Well, this has been well, I said I was an in-between, but okay, this has been, I'm refusing to just be the Fran. This has been a great episode. This was super fun. Please subscribe and rate and do all the things. It really, really helps us out. And we were really pleased to find out recently that people who listen to this episode, they listen to the whole thing, which is sometimes rare for podcast listeners. So it makes us so happy that either you fall asleep listening, and that's why, or you actually, want to hang with us. So,
I mean, I think it's because we've been keeping them tight, and I think it's a perfect commute podcast. It's like short and sweet, and we get you in, we get you out. So on that note, I am Shawn DiPasquale. You can find me at Shawn Writes. And Toria, where can people find you?
Toria Sheffy on Instagram, 2 F's and a Y.
Yep. And that's another episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield. Goodbye.
Ta-ta.
Toodaloo.
The Flashing Girl from Flushing.
Wait. Don't go yet. I know it normally ends there, but it's not over yet because we got a voicemail this week. I've said this at the end of a bunch of episodes, but anchor.fm/the nanny pod, there's a little button there and it says message, and you can leave like a little audio message for us to listen to with questions, whatever. We can play it on the show. So we're gonna play the messages that we got from Angelica Flores. Thank you, Angelica. Hi, Angelica.
Yeah, who is also a supporter and subscriber. So, huge thank you as well.
Yeah, and that's also right next to the message button at anchor.fm/thenannypod. There's a little support button where you can press a button and give us money, but you don't have to do that. It's just a thing you can do. That's not what the point of this is. We are very excited though to play this message, and then we'll briefly answer a couple of Angelica's questions, and then we'll let you guys get out of here. So, all right, take it away, Angelica.
Hey, Shawn. Hey, Toria. Y'all mentioned on this latest episode of Oh, Mr. Sheffield that you wanted more audio messages. So I took the bait. Here I am. My name's Angelica, and you probably see me in your Instagram comments. So I'm really thankful that y'all are doing this. It's feeding my soul. Thank you so much. 2 things. 1, Toria, I feel you about being super pissed when your cousin was born. I don't know why I need to share that with you, but that I really felt that on a spiritual level. Second of all, Shawn, we want to hear about the crazy people you've dated. We want the tea. Every week we should get a little snippet of just your dating life. If you don't mind sharing, I think that'd be awesome.
Okay, so what do you think, Toria? Our first message.
I loved it. I thought it was very clear, very concise. I usually have to leave dozens of messages before I get them right. So I was really impressed that she kind of came through under the pressure of calling this line.
Yeah, it was really cool. She didn't sound nervous or anything, and she said really nice stuff about us. And I hear you. I will definitely talk more about my calamitous past relationships. I've discussed it with Elizabeth, and she's fine if I dig into some of the dirt on some of those relationships.
And
so
I think it's going to come up. I feel like I'm confident this will come up organically as we talk about 6 seasons of a show that often revolves around romance and exes and dating.
I do too. I do too. And if it doesn't, we'll find a way to shoehorn it in because Angelica's a paid subscriber, and we honestly got to give the people that are paying us directly. I feel like we got to give them what they want. So, yes, I dated a girl who killed someone. I once dated a adult entertainment actress. We'll dish on all of it in upcoming episodes of Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast about Annie.
The Flushing girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.